I want to introduce Congressman Earl Pomeroy, former congressman from North Dakota. Congressman Pomeroy, please come up. Congressman Pomeroy has been a great friend of Macedonia, first going there, I think, when he was 18 or 19, when he was an exchange student in Serbia, I believe. But when he was a member of Congress, he really supported Macedonia to try to increase foreign aid and on all these political issues as well, on the name and NATO membership. And we really appreciate his friendship, his continued friendship, and we do hope to see him back in Congress because we really miss him there. And so without further ado, Congressman Earl Pomeroy.
I thought that the prior panel was absolutely superb. You have now had from every perspective, deep, substantive evaluation of the 20 years of independence of this great country, Macedonia. What can I add to that? Not a darn thing, but I'm a former member of Congress. You don't expect much from a former member of Congress. Let me start, Meadow, by addressing, want to go back there? My gosh. Look, I came to town in 1992. I watched Bill Clinton get inaugurated. I watched Newt Gingrich take the Speaker's gavel. I watched Bill Clinton get impeached. I watched George Bush get elected president, 5-4. I watched. So through the struggles of this decade, 9/11, Afghanistan war, Iraq war, Pelosi gets the gavel, Barack Obama becomes president of the United States. Man, that's a lot of stuff. It was a turbulent run, fascinating, thrilling, but like that roller coaster ride, you begin to think, when is this going to end? I began to think about retirement. Now, what's interesting is before I had even spoken those words, the North Dakota voters overwhelmingly approved of that concept. So I'm now happily retired, practicing law at Alston Bird Law Firm in town, but an ongoing friend to Macedonia, and it was my privilege to be there just 2 weeks ago. So today we celebrate something I never thought we'd see, the independence of Macedonia. I never thought we'd be celebrating the 20th anniversary of the independence of Macedonia. We've got a lot to be happy about, a lot to talk about, and a lot to think about going forward. Let me, in the course of my brief remarks, talk about 3 visits to Ohrid, because I think they kind of tell a story about the path that we've been on. I want to also make some observations then about what I saw as I was there just prior to the immediate elections, some hopeful signs, and candidly, friends must talk candidly with one another, some disconcerting signs, and what we might think about going forward. 3 visits to Ohrid. In 1973, I was, as Meadow mentioned, an exchange student to Kraljevo, Yugoslavia. I wasn't in Serbia, I was in Yugoslavia. And we traveled around Yugoslavia. Skopje, Yugoslavia, Ohrid, where we spent some time, Yugoslavia, my first time to this gorgeous city on a lake, and a big and gorgeous lake it was. But it was a lake very different than what you'd see today in Ohrid. There were Albanian gunships going up and down the middle of the lake, patrolling absolutely the impermeability of that Albanian border at Orhoša, and the very odd, long, ruinous run that he had in that country. Wasn't that Ohrid was, beautiful and a tourist center, anything like what we saw today. You had to register with the police station when you got to town. It had the feel, it had kind of a Soviet feel to it, although there had been a non-alignment since 1948. It was still, you just didn't get the sense of kind of a vibrant entrepreneurial spirit, creating new and open possibilities. It felt Soviet. The next visit to Ohrid. Taking a flight in 1999, December, following the war. I'd been during the war. I'd seen the horror of traumatized Kosovars streaming across at Blace, the massive Stankovic refugee facility, and a little country absolutely reeling under the crush of all these refugees. You know, I have a town I used to represent, Minot, North Dakota. Got 11,000 people evacuated this morning. This town is going to get hit with a wall of water it's never seen before. It had a ruinous flood 40 years ago. The flood hitting Minot today is 10 feet higher than that flood. And means that people are all over the place. But it's not like there's empty housing stock or even spare hotel rooms, because we're having an oil boom, and you couldn't get a hotel room in Minot, North Dakota before the flood. Well, where are they? Here's why I'm telling you that story. It reminds me of Macedonia. I mean, they got family living with family. They got friends living with friends. They got strangers living with strangers. Really, that was the kind of hospitality that Macedonia provided, the 350 streaming across at grave risk to their lives. Clearly, hundreds, maybe thousands of lives were saved by this spirit of Macedonia, and it's something that I'll never forget about the place. So going in December, that first tough winter after the war, oh, that was quite an experience. I went in with the director of USAID disaster response. Now you might be thinking, what's that got to do with Ohrid? Well, we're heading to Skopje, and there was some announcement on the plane, like it often is, the weather foggy as the dickens and everything. Sat down at this airport. After a while, we noticed doesn't seem to be much going on, but passengers get on a bus, head on out. We're wondering where in the world's that embassy car? Well, we weren't in Skopje, we were in Ohrid. We didn't understand this announcement in Macedonian. And finally, we hailed an ancient Mercedes taxi, one with no valve compression in the motor anymore, so as we went over the mountains, it got pretty slow. But it was a deathly fog. We hoped we weren't going to get run over from behind. I'll tell you what, the Prince Alexander Hotel in Skopje never looked better as it emerged from the fog. And through that trip, not just because of the circumstances, but because of the time, December 1999, Macedonia was not a happy place. It felt tense. It didn't feel devastated like Kosovo, where I spent the next several days, but it felt tense, uneasy, uncertain, and unclear, like the fog itself that surrounded that enveloped the cars who went over the mountains. Next trip, member of the House Democracy Partnership, going to Skopje to celebrate the dedication of a library within the parliament as part of a partnership between parliaments, U.S. Congress and the Macedonia Parliament. Very, very different day from that trip over the mountains. We were celebrating basically a peer-to-peer relationship with a democratic institution, the Legislative Assembly. Anyone who's ever served in a legislative assembly will be quick to tell you the people's branch of government. And so it was a happy and great professional exchange. We had a meeting in Ohrid. I'll never forget, beautiful facility, long table, multi-ethnic, multi-party representation, really a very embodiment of the success and the holding, the enduring success of the Ohrid Accords in the governing structure of Macedonia. 3 trips to Ohrid, Soviet-like, the fog of uncertainty, the celebration of a functional parliament. You know what? Like the old cigarette commercial used to say, we can say to our friend Macedonia, you've come a long way, baby. And I'm pleased to tell you, from what I just saw 2 weeks ago, this democracy is holding. We were there as part of an NDI-sponsored campaign, and I'm telling you, we've recognized Meadow a couple of times, we recognized the whole panel. We got to recognize Rob, because NDI has played such an ongoing, important role in Macedonia. And Rob Benjamin has been a major sustaining reason over that time for this tremendously effective NDI program in Macedonia, fair and free elections. It was a campaign that included a thumbprint. What mark will you leave was the marketing title. And you can take that question in a lot of different ways. But clearly, the central thrust of it was, the mark we will leave is a fair and free election. Because if we establish this pattern of fair and free elections, there will be no going back. And that's why, as we went around and saw all the candidates with their little buttons, they'd have the thumbprint reflecting the logo of fair and free elections, their pledge that they had all signed in committing to fair and free elections. The billboards, the materials, all carried the thumbprint reflecting the parties and the candidates signed up and committed themselves to fair and free elections. Well, how did it all work out? Well, I thought it was going swimmingly, but I left before Election Day. Let me tell you what OSCE thought about these elections, and I quote, "The Macedonian elections were competitive, transparent, and well administered throughout the country." That's a letter A for this experiment in democracy 20 years in. It was a vigorous campaign, and it was very, very open and direct expression of differences between the parties and between the candidates. It was evaluated maybe a little negatively for the negative tone of the elections. Well, as a veteran of 18 congressional races, let me tell you, that's just how elections go. Like the old saying goes, politics ain't beanbag. I watched a full-blown, vibrant, national debate unfolding. Now the negotiations continue to try and get the government in place. You've got maybe new members breaking off of one minor party. You got one guy that couldn't get any votes. He's resigned from his party. You got the discussions continuing. It's messy. It's not pretty. And it's democracy. That's just how it works. And so I think these machinations following the elections really are testament to the legitimacy of the elections. The people are governing. They've made their statement, and proportionately there will be a resolution and a functional government to come out of it. Now, I mentioned that friends talk candidly about concerns. And so let's visit about those concerns. And let's start with where we might as well start, with the name issue. I was very pleased to stand in the well of the House and express, as was so well expressed by our panelists, that it is wrong of a country to take their position in a multinational organization and blackball another country from participating in this multinational association because of bilateral differences. A multinational organization is by its nature multinational. It's not about the sticking points between countries, and every country's got sticking points. I'm a North Dakotan. We cuss the Canadians once in a while. We love them shopping in our malls, and they're the funnest people you'll ever meet, and they're just wonderful folks. But good God, I wish they'd quit sending their water to Minot. I mean, this is how, it's just how neighbors are. But you should never let those kinds of differences have the kind of disturbing, significant impact on the development of a new country, like this black ball of grease for Macedonia into the participation in NATO and on the path toward the European Union. It is wrong. I've said that on the floor of the House, and in fact, one time I gave a little talk on the floor of the House on this issue, and to my great surprise, applause burst out. Well, lo and behold, at that moment, some of my friends from the Macedonia Parliament here on the House Democracy Partnership Exchange were watching. They were quickly hammered down by the speaker. You can't applaud from the galley of the floor of the House. But it goes to show we were of one mind about this business of multinational. However, problems need to get fixed. And being right and not fixing problems is not as effective as getting the problems fixed. I believe that we're at a period of time where the tremendous international sympathy for Macedonia on the name issue is beginning to wear thin, where this business of who's being intransigent is unclear in the minds of many countries. And some countries, certainly there's some thinking about this within our country, believe it's time to get this thing resolved. If the Macedonians wanted to get it resolved, it could be resolved. This is not just the thinking of this administration. It was also present in the State Department in the prior administration. I know because we spoke directly with people within that administration on this question. Things have to get fixed. And it can't just get fixed sometimes the way you'd perfectly like them to get fixed. Now, a country's leadership team faces a juncture. Do you solve problems? Take the political hit maybe for compromises people don't find as their first choice, but reflecting as a leadership team would, the tremendous consequences for a country going forward have continued to exist in this no man's land, this limbo going forward? Do you take the hit and get that fixed? Or do you play the difference? Rally the troops, not the military troops, but the figure of speech. Rally the folks in righteous indignation, leading to nowhere. Well, I don't know really what the thinking is within the leadership team. But my belief is this must be fixed, and we need to think creatively to get it fixed. Following the election, the president of Greece called the prime minister to congratulate him for his party's success in once again holding the majority position in the parliamentary vote. They're talking. This is something maybe we haven't seen before. Maybe there's possibilities here. Parties in the election talked about resolution just around the corner. I think it's incumbent upon those of us who love Macedonia to make it very clear that there's so much at stake to getting this resolved. It must get resolved. I'm not suggesting, it's not my place to, I'm a North Dakotan. We don't have members of the Macedonian diaspora in North Dakota. I told Meto, I think we had a Macedonian diaspora member drive across our state once, but that's about it. There goes that Canada again. So it is not my place to outline what might be the dimensions of a deal. I'm just telling you, being righteous and non-resolved is not, in the end, going to advance this great country's future as much as getting this fixed. Another point of concern. We talk about the tremendous economic opportunities facing Macedonia as a place with superior education, a youthful workforce just loaded with talent, a proximity to Europe, and a cost structure that's very, very competitive, as well as a governing disposition to try and be responsive to what it takes to make the most of this economic opportunity. And we must, because a future where basically the jobs are in government and your hope of having employment for you or your family is getting a government job, this is not what you envision as the future of a country. So this build out of the economy, making the most of this opportunity is critically important. Now again, as a former member of Congress, North Dakota, I don't really have a sense for the dimensions of the national budget. But I do know, driving around Skopje, looking at all these statues and construction of buildings, government buildings, we've got an awful lot of money being spent not going into a build-out of infrastructure designed to make the most of growing the economy. Now, there's jobs in building statues, and the artisans have done, some significant work there. But I gotta believe that scarce public dollars could be more appropriately applied in making the most of an economic future so that our young people can have work at home instead of having to wander around, hope for something either in the government or in Europe, or join part of Meto's diaspora. We don't want that for the future of our young people. We want jobs in Skopje, good jobs. And that takes building out the infrastructure, and that takes resources. And if you're spending resources on statues, I'm not sure you got the resources you need for the optimal build-out to make the most of the economic future. Let me close by talking about someone that I really have come to admire, an absolutely tireless advocate who, like Rob Benjamin, has really devoted his life as a non-Macedonian to making the most of the future of Macedonia. This man's name is Chris Henshaw. He's the country director for NDI. We've sent him there on behalf of our country. He's a Brit. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And he is absolutely devoted to making this go. He has led a program that has built out constituent services from the members of parliament. He has worked closely with parliamentary leaders to create oversight hearings within the assembly. Chris Henshaw believes precisely what the House Democracy Partnership believes, and that is if we can make the assembly stronger, we will have a stronger democracy in Macedonia and good things going forward. Now, for all the successes of Chris Henshaw, he has indicated that there's some facets of this democracy that are more challenging and more troublesome than what he's seen in his entire 7 years there. Is he discouraged? Absolutely not. But his wife has moved from London to join. Unlike Chris, who's one might call linguistically impaired, he doesn't do a very good job with the Queen's English. Forget about Macedonian. But his wife is studying Macedonian, becoming fluent, teaching in Macedonia, and they intend, come what may with NDI funding, to remain in Macedonia. He is hopeful about the future, and he will never quit on Macedonia. I want to tell you that I think that person and that view reflects the view of the United States of America with its friend Macedonia. We will have issues, we'll have differences, we'll have suggestions, but we must be rock solid, standing with this critically placed democracy whose values have been reflected, as was mentioned, by the service of the soldiers with our soldiers in Afghanistan, these very difficult undertakings, people whose hearts we've come to know and we've come to love, a future friendship together, absolutely unshakable. So happy birthday, Macedonia. It's been my great privilege to be a friend through this process.